The first 911 call wasn't a scream. It wasn't a gunshot. It was a complaint. At 20:17 a.m., a neighbor on Ashford Lane reported a steady thumping coming from the basement of a foreclosed house. Number 48, utilities disconnected. Property vacant for 6 months. No registered occupants. No security system. No reason for sound. Patrol responded twice over 3 nights. Each time, silence. Each time, nothing visible from the exterior. On the 4th night, the caller added a detail that changed everything. The noise sounds like breathing between the knocks. Detective Rachel Monroe arrived before the 2nd Patrol Unit cleared the perimeter. She stepped out of her car and paused. Ashford Lane was quiet in the way suburban streets are quiet. Manufactured calm, identical houses, trimmed hedges. But number 48 felt detached from the row. Windows blacked by dust, lawn half dead, mail slot taped shut, and yet the front walkway was clean. Recently swept. Rachel's boots hit the concrete with deliberate rhythm. Denim jacket, dark V, cut top beneath it, fitted jeans, army boots. Functional, uncomplicated. She didn't carry superstition into scenes. Only observation. The air near the porch held a faint metallic tang. Not decay. Not mold. Something disturbed. Door was unlocked last night. One of the officers said. Tonight it's latched. Rachel examined the handle. No pry marks. No forced entry. She stepped inside. The interior smelled stale, but layered over that was something fresher. Earth, damp soil. The living room was stripped. No furniture, no copper theft, no vandalism. This wasn't opportunistic trespassing, it was controlled use. From somewhere below, a dull impact echoed. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. 3 knocks. Rachel didn't react outwardly, but she registered the pattern. Intentional rhythm. Not random movement. Basement, she asked. Locked from outside. That was the first real anomaly. Foreclosures are secured at entry points, not internal doors. They descended toward the basement entrance. The padlock was new, polished steel, recently installed. Rachel crouched. Fine scratch marks around the latch. Repeated friction in one specific direction. Not from break-in attempts. From someone inside testing the resistance. The thudding stopped. Silence settled heavy enough to feel. Rachel rested her palm against the door. Cold wood. Then, a slow exhale. Not from behind the door. From below it. Breathing traveled through gaps in the frame. Measured. Alive. Cut it, she said. Bolt cutters snapped clean through. The door opened inward, releasing a wave of colder air. Not the stagnant chill of an empty basement. This was ventilated air. Circulated. Halfway down the stairs, Rachel noticed wiring along the wall. Improvised. Battery, fed. Recently installed. The bulb at the bottom flickered on as their boots creaked down the steps. Someone wanted light down here. The basement itself looked ordinary at first glance. Concrete floor. Cinderblock walls. Empty shelving. But the shelving had been moved. The dust outline beneath it didn't match its current placement, and in the far corner sat an industrial storage crate. Reinforced. Ventilation holes drilled in clean, symmetrical rows. The crate vibrated faintly. An officer raised his weapon. Rachel shook her head slightly. The sound wasn't coming from inside. It was traveling through it. She knelt and pressed her hand flat against the concrete floor. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. The resonance came from beneath the slab. This floor's hollow, she said. City blueprints were requested immediately. They showed no sublevel, no crawl space, no secondary foundation, which meant someone excavated manually. The crate wasn't the holding space. It was a decoy, a psychological layer. She pushed it aside. Underneath was a steel hatch welded into freshly cut concrete. The weld beads were amateur but effective. Recently cooled. The knocking stopped. Silence again. Then, breathing. Closer now, Rachel felt a tightening in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. This wasn't chaos. It was construction. Time invested. Planning executed. Someone engineered captivity. Cut through. The portable saw screamed against metal. When the hatch lifted, the smell surfaced first. Human, confined, alive. Below was a dirt chamber reinforced with timber beams. Rough excavation but structurally supported. A mattress, a bucket, a lantern, and a man. Bound at the wrists, ankles secured, jag in place, eyes alert, not delirious. 42-year-old Evan Calder, missing for 6 days. Rachel descended into the chamber herself. Up close, Calder showed no signs of starvation, no visible torture, minimal bruising beyond restraint marks. She removed the gag. The first thing he said was not, "Help me." It was, "He said you'd come." Rachel held his gaze steady. "Who said that?" Calder swallowed, throat dry but controlled. "He watches cases. He picks the ones that stall." The words settled like dust in an abandoned room. Stall. 3 months earlier, a missing persons investigation had frozen without evidence. 2 weeks ago, an attempted abduction. Victim escaped, suspect vanished. Both incidents involved contractors. Both involved properties in foreclosure. Both involved unpermitted basement renovations. Rachel's mind aligned the pattern. "Did he tell you why?" she asked. Calder's breathing sharpened slightly. "He said the system leaves holes. He fills them." Upstairs, officers secured the scene. Rachel scanned the chamber. There was no sadism here, no unnecessary suffering. Water was supplied, food remnants minimal but sufficient. Ventilation carefully measured. This wasn't punishment. It was containment. "Did he hurt you?" "No." "Did he say what he wanted?" Calder hesitated. "He wanted me to admit it." "Admit what?" "That I built it." Rachel's pulse slowed instead of spiking. "Built what?" Calder's eyes flicked upward, to the concrete ceiling. The other one. There it was. Not a single chamber. A prototype. A rehearsal. Or a test site. If you're following this case, understand something: kidnappers driven by impulse leave chaos. Kidnappers driven by control leave infrastructure. This man built infrastructure. And he wasn't finished. Rachel signaled for paramedics to prepare extraction. As Calder was lifted out, she stayed behind for one more scan of the chamber. On one timber beam, etched lightly into the wood, were 3 numbers. 323, the same rhythm as the knocks. A signature. Or a countdown. Upstairs, dawn began pressing faint gray light through dirty windows. Ashford Lane would wake soon. Residents would sip coffee while crime scene tape fluttered outside. They would believe the danger had passed. But Rachel didn't. Because someone had invested days in construction. Someone had studied cold cases. Someone had predicted her arrival. And someone else, somewhere, was still part of the equation. Back on the lawn, as Calder was loaded into the ambulance, Rachel's phone vibrated. Unknown number, no caller ID. She answered without speaking. Static. Then a calm male voice. "You're early." The line disconnected. Rachel stared at the vacant house. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. By 7:40 a.m., the house on Ashford Lane was sealed. Forensics cataloged the hatch, the weld seams, the battery rig, the timber supports. Soil samples were bagged, boot impressions cast, every surface dusted. Nothing about the chamber was rushed. It was measured. Evan Calder sat in an ambulance 3 houses down, wrapped in a thermal blanket despite the mild morning. His vitals were stable. No dehydration. No visible trauma beyond abrasions at the wrists. Rachel stood outside the ambulance doors. "You said he wanted you to admit something," she said evenly. Calder avoided eye contact at first, not shame. Calculation. "I do foundation work," he replied. "Basement reinforcements. Retaining walls." "That explains your skill set," Rachel said. "It doesn't explain why you were buried alive." Calder swallowed. "He said I build things that shouldn't exist." Rachel waited. Silence is leverage. People fill it. 3 months ago. Calder continued. "I was subcontracted for a private renovation. Cash job. No permits. Foreclosure property." Rachel's gaze sharpened. "Address?" "Maple Crest Drive. Number 11212. She didn't react, but she recognized it instantly. Maple Crest Drive was tied to a missing persons case that had stalled 92 days earlier. A freelance journalist named Priya Sethi had vanished after investigating housing code violations. Her last confirmed location, a foreclosed property on Maple Crest Drive. Rachel's phone was already in her hand. "Pull the Maple Crest file," she instructed dispatch. "Open it." Calder exhaled slowly, like someone stepping toward confession without yet committing to it. "He didn't hurt me," he repeated. "He fed me, gave me water, talked." "About what?" "Cases. Yours." That detail held. Specifically, "He said you close cases the system buries." The phrasing unsettled her more than a threat would have. System buries. The chamber in the basement wasn't improvised confinement. It was symbolism. You worked on Maple Crest. Rachel pressed. What did you build? Calder's jaw tightened. A sublevel. Blueprints didn't show one. They never do. There it was. Rachel's mind reconstructed the patterns. Foreclosed homes. Contractors paid off record. Unpermitted excavation. Missing individual connected to oversight journalism inspections. What was the purpose of the sublevel? She asked. Calder hesitated longer this time. He said it was storage. Storage for what? Documents. That word landed with weight. Rachel stepped back from the ambulance. Documents implied motive. Financial, legal, or blackmail. Inside the command vehicle, she spread the Maple Crest file across the table. Photos. Interview transcripts. Site inspection notes. The original investigation had focused on Sethi's last phone ping. There was no forced entry. No struggle. The house had been empty. Empty except for a recently poured section of basement slab that investigators had deemed structural reinforcement. They hadn't scanned beneath it, because there was no permit indicating modification. Rachel closed her eyes briefly. 92 days ago she had requested ground-penetrating radar for Maple Crest. The request was denied due to budget constraints. Case reassigned. Stalled. She opened her eyes. He picks the ones that stall, Calder had said. Not random. Curated. A vigilante. No. Vigilantes leave bodies in public. This offender hid people in engineered silence. Her phone buzzed. Forensics preliminary report. The soil inside the Ashford Lane chamber did not match the property's natural composition. It contained a specific sand-clay blend used in foundation backfill. Commercial supply. Traceable. Rachel pivoted. Run Calder's purchase history for the last 6 months, she ordered. Cash withdrawals. Material suppliers. Equipment rentals. Calder wasn't just a victim. He was a component. She stepped back into the ambulance. Who hired you for Maple Crest? Anonymous broker. He replied. Used a prepaid number. Met me on site. Paid half up front. Description. Late 30s. Clean. Calm. Not construction type. Watched more than he spoke. Accent. Locale. Rachel studied Calder's pupils. Steady, no dilation spikes consistent with deception. Did you build more than one sublevel? Silence. Then? Yes. How many? 3. The weight of that number settled heavily. Addresses. I don't remember all of them. You will. Calder's breathing tightened. He said if I didn't cooperate, he'd put me where the others are. The others. Not a rehearsal. An active system. Rachel leaned forward slightly. Did you see anyone else down there? No, Bo. Did you hear anyone? Another pause. Yes. The word was nearly a whisper. Where? Second site. Eastbrook Avenue. After hours, I heard movement below the slab before we sealed it. Rachel's jaw set. Was anyone reported missing near that address? Dispatch responded quickly. 2 months ago. City housing inspector. Name Daniel Kaur. Investigation suspended. No evidence. Rachel felt a familiar pressure at the base of her skull. A pattern forming faster than resources could respond. Get a warrant for Eastbrook, she said. By mid-morning, the task force split in 2 directions. Team 1 Eastbrook Avenue. Team 2 Maple Crest Drive. Rachel chose Eastbrook because if Calder was telling the truth, someone might still be alive. When they arrived, the house appeared identical to Ashford Lane. Quiet, undisturbed, recently foreclosed. The basement showed the same telltale signs. Dust displacement. Slight variance in slab color. A faint hollow echo under boot impact. Rachel knelt, pressed her palm against the concrete. No knocking, no breathing. But silence can be engineered. Bring the radar. This time, no budget denial. The scan returned within minutes. Void detected. Approximately 6 feet below slab. Dimensions consistent with a human scale chamber. Rachel exhaled once. Cut it. The saw cut deeper this time. Thicker slab. Better reinforcement. Whoever designed these spaces learned quickly. When the hatch lifted, the air that rose from below was stale. Heavy. Not ventilated. The chamber beneath was smaller, cruder, and empty. Except for one thing. A single camera mounted in the corner. Still powered. Recording. Rachel climbed down. The lens faced upward. Watching the hatch. Watching for her. She didn't touch it. Trace the signal, she ordered. Tech shook his head. Offline storage. No active transmission. Meaning the offender retrieved footage manually. He returned to his sites. He monitored progress. He observed law enforcement response. Rachel scanned the walls. On one timber beam, identical to Ashford Lane, were carved numbers 323. Not a countdown, a sequence, or a signature. She stared at it longer than she intended. 3 months ago, her unresolved case, the one that still woke her at 3:23 a.m., had stalled on March 23rd, 3:23. Coincidence or message? Her phone vibrated again. Unknown number. She answered. You missed one? The same calm male voice said. Click. Disconnected. Rachel didn't react outwardly, but internally something shifted. This wasn't just infrastructure, it was choreography. He was moving her, guiding her, testing response time. And somewhere within the 3 sites Calder built, at least one chamber had held someone long enough to matter. If you're still listening, understand this. The offender doesn't want chaos. He wants acknowledgement. He wants the stalled cases reopened. He wants attention directed where the system stopped looking. But buried inside that intent is a darker question. Is he rescuing victims from neglect, or creating them to prove a point? By noon, Rachel had one confirmed survivor, one empty chamber, and at least one more unaccounted site. And the man orchestrating it all had just demonstrated he was watching her in real time. The investigation wasn't reacting anymore. It was being pulled. By 1:15 p.m., they had the 3rd address. Calder didn't remember it at first. Memory under stress fragments. Protects itself. But once Rachel shifted tactics, street names instead of numbers, nearby landmarks instead of intersections, recognition flickered. Near the old rail overpass, he said. Corner lot. Blue siding. Water damage on the west wall. Property records confirmed it. 214 Briar Hollow Road. Foreclosed 4 months ago. No renovation permits filed. Rachel didn't wait for full tactical assembly. Time had already proven itself to be the most fragile variable in this case. When they arrived, the house looked less abandoned than the others. Curtains drawn, lawn trimmed recently, mail removed, maintained, not vacant. That difference mattered. Rachel signaled perimeter containment before approaching. Front door locked. Rear entrance reinforced with a new deadbolt inconsistent with foreclosure standard hardware. Whoever used this site invested more effort. Inside, the air was warmer than Ashford Lane or Eastbrook. Humidity present. Electrical hum faint, but steady. Someone had active power routed discreetly. The basement stairs creaked under controlled descent. No visible battery rig this time. Hardline feeds spliced from the main panel. Cleaner installation. Professional. At the base of the stairs, Rachel paused. The floor showed the same subtle variance in concrete tone. But unlike the previous 2 sites, this slab had been sealed with industrial epoxy coating. Aesthetic concealment. More permanent. Ground scan, she said. The radar unit passed slowly over the surface. Technician's voice tightened. Void confirmed. Larger footprint. Approximately 8 by 10. Bigger. Deliberate expansion. Rachel crouched and pressed her palm flat against the epoxy. No knocking. No breathing. But something else. Vibration. Faint. Mechanical? Kill the power? She ordered. The hum ceased. Silence settled. Then, a soft metallic click beneath the slab. Not organic. Not movement. Machinery. Step back, Rachel said quietly. They cut through the epoxy layer first. The smell rising from beneath wasn't stale like Eastbrook. It was ventilated. Controlled. When the hatch lifted, cool filtered air flowed upward. The chamber below was reinforced with steel framing instead of timber. LED strip lighting along the ceiling. Camera in each corner. And at the center, a chair. Bolted to the floor. Empty. Facing a mounted monitor. Rachel descended carefully. The monitor flickered on the moment her boots touched the dirt. Live feed. From above. From the basement. From her. He was watching. The screen split into 4 quadrants. Ashford Lane Chamber. Eastbrook Chamber. This chamber. And a 4th, unknown location. In the 4th quadrant, a dimly lit space revealed a human silhouette. Seated. Head lowered. Unmoving. Alive or dead. Impossible to tell. Rachel's pulse slowed instead of spiking. Emotion clouds assessment. Assessment keeps people breathing. Trace signal, she said calmly. Tech responded from above. Closed circuit network. Localized relay. Not internet-based, meaning proximity. He was near, within transmission range. The screen shifted. Text appeared wo you fo drzre. Thr ice ona wo you numbu owen. Rachel stepped closer to the monitor. You want attention, she said evenly, aware he could hear her through embedded microphones. You've got it. A pause. Then new text attentio isntacconty. The fourth quadrant zoomed slightly. The silhouette lifted its head. A man, mid-40s, bruising visible along the jaw. Conscious, eyes open. Rachel recognized him, not from file memory, from a briefing 2 weeks earlier. Assistant District Attorney Mark Ellison, assigned to internal review of dismissed housing code violations tied to foreclosure corruption. He'd gone missing 5 days ago. Officially listed as voluntary leave pending investigation. One true. Rachel's voice didn't change. What do you want? The text responded slowly as if considered carefully. ADMITSYSTEM FILATM. Them. Plural. Release him, she said. The text. YO RELISTEM. The screen switched again. Footage appeared. Archival video clips. Housing complaints dismissed. Inspection reports overridden. Budget denial memos. Rachel recognized one document instantly. Her request for ground-penetrating radar at Maplecrest. Denied due to allocation constraints. Her signature at the bottom. Forwarded. Closed. The offender had compiled institutional oversight failures. Not random, curated. You abducted people to make a point, Rachel said. Correction appeared instantly. I par is arveskam. The fourth quadrant zoomed further. Ellison shifted slightly in his chair, breathing visible, alive. You buried them? Rachel replied. PR skasi. The word lingered. From what? Rachel's mind raced. Priya Sethi, journalist investigating code violations. Daniel Kaur, housing inspector. Avon Calder, contractor building unpermitted sublevels. Mark Ellison, assistant DA reviewing dismissals. All connected by foreclosure oversight. All touching systemic negligence. All removed from public visibility. Not killed. Contained. Preserved. In his mind. Rachel's jaw tightened slightly. You don't get to decide who disappears. The text paused longer this time. Tiandu hy didi yo you le ttm. Silence filled the chamber heavier than dirt ever could. He wasn't accusing. He was indicting. Rachel felt a flicker of something she rarely allowed at scenes. Self-audit. She had pushed Maplecrest. She had flagged Eastbrook. But she hadn't escalated when denied. She had followed chain of command, procedure, protocol, and people had vanished in the gaps. The monitor displayed a timer. Zerto 300,300 counting down. 3 hours, 23 minutes. 323 again. What happens when it hits 0? She asked. No response. Instead, the fourth quadrant expanded. Ellison's chair was positioned over what appeared to be a sealed trapdoor. Industrial bolts. Pressure mechanism visible beneath. If the timer ended, the chair would drop. Rachel didn't need schematics to know that. Location, she said sharply. No text, only the steady ticking of digital seconds. Trace power draw radius. She ordered upstairs. Technician's voice filtered down. Signal bouncing through short-range relays. Rough estimate. Within 2-mile radius. 2 miles. Urban density. Hundreds of properties. Rachel stared at the monitor. You want accountability, she said evenly. Then show me where. The screen shifted again. Coordinates appeared, but incomplete, latitude only. Missing longitude digits. A puzzle. Not a rescue. He wasn't giving the location. He was testing her capacity to deduce it. 3 months ago, her unresolved case had stalled at 3:23 a.m. The timestamp on Priya Sethi's final voicemail was 3:23. Now the timer read 3:11. He was binding cases together by time. Rachel climbed back up from the chamber. Map all foreclosure properties within 2 miles of Briar Hollow purchased or inspected at exactly 3:23 a.m. on any logged record in the last 6 months. Silence upstairs. Then rapid keyboard strikes. 4 properties match timestamp anomalies. Tech responded. Rachel's mind compartmentalized instantly. Split team. Parallel search. No margin for delay. As she stepped outside into daylight, her phone vibrated again. Unknown number, she answered. You're closer than the others, the calm voice said. Where is he? She demanded. A soft exhale on the other end. You already stood above him once. Click. Disconnected. Rachel stopped moving. Above him once. She replayed the day in her mind. Ashford Lane. Eastbrook. Briar Hollow. Maplecrest. Maplecrest. They had sealed it as structurally reinforced, never cut beneath. Because funding was denied, she turned sharply. Redirect to Maple Crest, now. Timer on the monitor reads 038047 and counting. Maple Crest Drive looked exactly as Rachel remembered it. That was the problem. The house sat in stillness, windows opaque with dust, foreclosure notice peeling at the edges, driveway empty. No visible disturbance. No sign that 92 days earlier, a journalist had vanished after walking through its front door, and no sign that beneath its foundation something might still be breathing. The timer read 205-412 when they arrived. Rachel didn't waste seconds on perimeter formalities. Full entry. Basement first. Inside, the air carried the same faint damp, earth undertone she'd registered months ago, but dismissed as ordinary structural moisture. It wasn't ordinary. It was concealed excavation. The basement lights flickered on. There it was. The reinforced slab section. 8 feet across, smoother than the surrounding concrete. Slightly different aggregate mix. A subtle crescent seam along the east edge. 92 days ago, she had stood here. 92 days ago, she had asked for ground-penetrating radar. Denied. Case reassigned. Stalled. The timer in her mind merged with the one ticking somewhere unseen. Rather 251s and 03. Cut it, she said. The saw blade screamed into concrete. Dust filled the air in thick clouds. Officers rotated to manage ventilation. As the slab fractured, Rachel felt something she rarely acknowledged. Anger, but not outward. Contained. Focused. If someone was beneath this floor, the system hadn't just failed. It had sealed them in. When the final section cracked and lifted, the smell hit immediately. Not rot. Not decay. Ventilated air. Filtered. Alive. Rachel dropped into the opening before the debris settled fully. The chamber below was deeper than Briar Hollow. Reinforced with timber like Ashford Lane but more structurally sound. LD strips lined the ceiling. A portable air filtration unit hummed softly in the corner, and seated against the far wall, Priya Sethi. Thin. Disoriented. Alive. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the sudden brightness. For a second, she didn't react. Then recognition flickered. "You took your time," she said hoarsely. Rachel exhaled once. "How long has he been keeping you here?" Priya blinked as if recalibrating time itself. "I don't know. He kept the lights dim. No clocks. No phone? Did he hurt you?" "No. No." The word came quickly. "He said if I stayed quiet, I'd survive." Rachel scanned the chamber. Food supplies stacked neatly. Water containers labeled with dates. Medical kit in the corner. Unopened. This wasn't neglect. It was preservation. "Why you?" Rachel asked. Priya laughed weakly. "I was asking the wrong questions." "What questions?" Why housing code violations were being dismissed. Why foreclosures were accelerating in certain districts. Why inspectors were being reassigned. The pattern sharpened further. He wasn't targeting random oversight. He was targeting corruption linked to foreclosures. "You uncovered something." Rachel pressed. Priya hesitated. "He said I was close." "Close to what?" "Proof." Rachel felt the timer in her head ticking faster. 0 to 2 or 3 sevens and 44. "Did he tell you who he is?" "No name." "Just calm. Always calm." "Did he say what would happen when the timer runs out?" Priya's expression shifted slightly. "He said someone else would go under." Upstairs, paramedics prepared extraction. Rachel climbed back up long enough to check the monitor feed relayed from Briar Hollow. The fourth quadrant still showed Mark Ellison seated over the trapdoor. Timer now at 02035902. Priya was stabilized and lifted out. 2 confirmed survivors. Which meant the offender's claim of preservation wasn't entirely false. But preservation under coercion is still captivity. Rachel stepped outside into daylight. Maple Crest was no longer a cold file. It was a crime scene, and a confession of institutional blindness. Her phone vibrated again. Unknown number. She answered immediately. "You see," the calm voice said, "she would have vanished into paperwork." "You don't get to rewrite justice," Rachel replied. Silence. Then, "I didn't rewrite it. I paused it." Rachel's gaze drifted back to the house. "Where is Ellison?" A measured breath on the other end. "He buried investigations for political convenience." "That's an accusation." "It's documentation." "Release him." Another pause. "Find the last property," he said. "Before the clock ends." Click. Disconnected. Rachel didn't waste energy on frustration. Review Ellison's case assignments. she ordered. Anything dismissed at 3023 a.m. or stamped after hours override. Within minutes, data populated across the mobile command screen. One address repeated. 3 separate inspection dismissals. 1 foreclosure acceleration. All processed at 3:23 a.m. Property 77 Halbrook Industrial Park. Commercial Zone. Warehouse classification. Foreclosure finalized 2 weeks ago. Rachel's pulse didn't quicken. It narrowed. 02s and 18s 555. Industrial properties allowed larger substructures. Easier to conceal. Harder to inspect thoroughly. Mobilize, she said. All units. As the convoy pulled out, she replayed something Priya had said. He said if I stayed quiet, I'd survive. Survive what? Exposure, public fallout, or the final stage of his plan. The offender wasn't improvising, he was escalating. Each chamber had been more advanced than the last. Ashford Lane, basic containment. Eastbrook, observation and recording. Briar Hollow, interactive psychological engagement. Maple Crest, long-term preservation. Halbrook would be. Rachel stopped the thought before finishing it. The timer ticked down to Zothor 712,003. As they approached the industrial park, gray steel buildings lined both sides of the road. Warehouse 77 stood at the far end. No visible vehicles. No broken locks. No activity. Too clean. Rachel stepped out of the car. The wind carried the faintest trace of something metallic, not blood. Machinery. Active machinery. Thermal scan. She ordered. The reading came back within seconds. Heat signature below ground. Large. And moving. Timer 020719. Rachel looked at the reinforced warehouse door. You said I stood above him once, she murmured to herself. Had she? 3 months ago. Budget meeting. Halbrook Industrial Park redevelopment proposal had crossed her desk briefly as a corruption footnote. She had skimmed it. Signed off. Moved on. Above him once. Her jaw tightened. Breach. The door gave way. Inside, the warehouse was empty except for a central steel platform bolted to the concrete floor, suspended over what appeared to be a recessed section. No visible hatch. No seam. Perfectly flush. Rachel stepped onto the platform. It vibrated faintly. Mechanical hum beneath. Timer Azor 20408. You wanted accountability, she said quietly, knowing he could hear through hidden microphones. I'm here. The floor beneath her boots shifted. Not collapsing. Unlocking. A circular section began lowering slowly into darkness. Controlled descent. Rachel didn't step back. She wrote it down. Into the final chamber. The platform descended slowly. Controlled, engineered. Not a trapdoor drop, no sudden violence. A measured lowering into darkness. Rachel stood centered, knees slightly flexed for balance, eyes adjusting as the warehouse ceiling sealed above her. Timer 01 Scene 5E9V42. When the platform settled, light strips flickered on along the perimeter of a massive underground chamber. This wasn't improvised excavation. This was architectural. Steel beams reinforced the walls. Industrial ventilation systems hummed softly. A central workstation sat opposite the platform. Multiple monitors, hard drives stacked in labeled racks, schematics pinned in obsessive alignment. And seated calmly in a steel chair near the workstation, Mark Ellison, alive, restrained, but upright. Across the chamber, leaning against a support beam, stood the architect, mid-30s. Clean cut. Neutral clothing. No mask. No visible weapon. He didn't run. He didn't flinch. You're right on schedule, he said evenly. Rachel didn't raise her weapon immediately. Distance 12 feet. Clear line of sight. 2 officers descending behind her. Step away from him, she said. He complied without resistance. Hands visible. Calm. Always calm. Timer 01 Send Fee 710. You built all of this, Rachel said. Yes. By. For what purpose? He glanced toward Ellison. To stop disappearance. Rachel's voice didn't shift. You abducted 4 people. I prevented 4 erasures. Ellison stirred weakly. Rachel stepped closer but kept her focus on the architect. Name. Adrian Vale. The name meant nothing immediately. Occupation. Civil engineer. Former city infrastructure consultant. Former. Terminated? Rachel asked. Resigned. 4. Internal dispute over housing code suppression. There it was. A grievance, but not delusion. You decided to build prisons. I built pause points. Vale corrected. Timer 015403. Rachel scanned the chamber. 1 large reinforced cell against the far wall. Currently empty. 1 workstation. 1 platform shaft. No additional exits visible. You monitored stalled cases, she said. Selected people tied to foreclosure corruption. Less. You buried them. I preserved them until someone competent looked. His eyes held steady on hers. Not erratic. Not manic. Measured conviction. Rachel's jaw tightened slightly. You don't get to decide when the system acts. The system didn't act. Vale replied calmly. You requested radar at Maple Crest. Denied. Case closed. 92 days. She would have died when ventilation batteries failed. Rachel felt the strike of that statement, because it wasn't entirely false. You could have brought evidence forward, she said. I did. It was archive, a gesture toward the workstation. Screens flickered alive. Financial transfers, internal memos, override signatures, foreclosure acceleration patterns, inspection dismissals timestamped 3:23 a.m. Why 3:23? Rachel asked. March 23rd. Vale said. The day Daniel Corr's final inspection report was deleted from the city database. Rachel's pulse remained controlled. Ellison, she asked. Vale's gaze shifted briefly toward the restrained ADA. He authorized dismissals under political pressure. Not illegal, just convenient. Ellison struggled against his restraints weakly. That's not. He rasped. Vale ignored him. I needed acknowledgement, he said. Public. Documented. Irreversible. Timer 0148022. Rachel stepped closer. And if I hadn't come, you would have, Vale replied simply. You were certain. You don't ignore patterns. It wasn't flattery. It was assessment. Rachel finally raised her weapon fully. Timer. What happens at 0? Vale didn't look at the display. Nothing. Silence. Nothing. She repeated. The timer ensures urgency, he said. Without urgency, files stall again. Rachel studied his posture. No visible trigger device. No dead man switch. No panic indicators. Release Ellison, she ordered. Vale stepped back further, hands still visible. You already reopened Maple Crest, he said. You exposed Briar Hollow. You'll audit the dismissals. That's not your call. No, he agreed quietly. It's yours. Timers 01C4509. Rachel moved past him, cutting Ellison's restraints. Officers secured Vale without resistance. No struggle. No attempt to flee. As cuffs locked around his wrists, Vale's expression didn't shift. You think this ends with arrest? He asked Rachel calmly. It ends with due process. He almost smiled, but didn't. Due process buried them. Rachel didn't respond. Because arguing philosophy underground while a crime scene unfolds accomplishes nothing. She escorted Ellison toward the platform lift. Before ascending, she turned once more to Vale. Why keep them alive? She asked. He met her gaze. Because dead victims are statistics. Living ones testify. That answer lingered longer than she liked. Timer 01402A33. As the platform ascended, Rachel watched Vale shrink below into custody. The underground chamber, the culmination of months of engineered intervention, felt less like a lair and more like a case study. Anger without chaos. Obsession without spectacle. Infrastructure built to compensate for institutional gaps. But still criminal. Still coercive. Still wrong. When they reached the warehouse floor, paramedics took Ellison immediately. Rachel stepped aside as Vale was brought up in restraints. He didn't resist. Didn't speak. Didn't ask for counsel. He simply observed. Outside, flashing lights reflected off steel siding. Industrial park silent otherwise. Rachel stood still for a moment longer than necessary. 2 survivors recovered. 1 rescued ADA. 1 offender in custody. 4 chambers dismantled. Timer inside the underground chamber would eventually reach 0. And nothing would happen. Except exposure. She knew what came next. Internal investigation. Media inquiry. Political fallout. And questions she would have to answer, including why her radar request at Maple Crest wasn't escalated beyond denial. Vale hadn't just abducted victims. He had forced confrontation. As he was placed into the transport vehicle, he spoke one final sentence to her. Next time they deny you, don't file it. Rachel didn't respond, because that wasn't how justice works. But as the convoy pulled away from Halbrook Industrial Park, one truth remained unavoidable. The system had gaps. Vale exploited them illegally, but he hadn't invented them. And that meant this case wasn't closed. It was exposed. By sunset, the narrative had already split in 2. Officially, the department announced the arrest of Adrian Vale, civil engineer, charged with multiple counts of kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and criminal conspiracy. 4 victims recovered alive. Investigation ongoing. Unofficially, the city was bracing. Because once the media learned that every abducted individual had been connected to foreclosure oversight, and that 2 of them had active complaints about code suppression, the story stopped being about one underground chamber. It became about what had been buried above ground. Rachel stood inside the observation room as Vale was processed. He sat upright in the interrogation chair. No slouch, no visible fatigue. He had slept little over the past 72 hours, according to preliminary timeline reconstruction, yet his posture remained composed. He had anticipated arrest. He had designed for it. Roland's voice filtered faintly through the glass as he reviewed intake notes for the official case file. The tone was measured, precise. Facts first, interpretation later. Rachel stepped into the interrogation room. Vale's eyes lifted. "No attorney?" she asked. "I'll request one when necessary," he replied calmly. "You constructed 4 illegal detention chambers." "Yes." "You abducted 4 people." "Yes." "You monitored live feeds and engineered a countdown to force response." "Yes." No deflection. No euphemism. Just confirmation. Rachel leaned forward slightly. "You could have released the evidence anonymously. It would have been suppressed." "You don't know that." "I do," Vale said evenly. "I tried." He nodded toward the evidence folders on the metal table. "Check the archived engineering compliance review from 9 months ago. My formal complaint about Maple Crest soil irregularities. Closed without inspection." Rachel didn't respond immediately. She had already seen it in the workstation files underground. Vale had filed internal engineering objections twice, both dismissed. The pattern predated the abductions. "You escalated to kidnapping," she said. "I escalated to undeniability." Silence filled the room. Vale didn't appear triumphant. He appeared resolved. "Did you ever intend to kill them?" Rachel asked. "No. If we hadn't reopened Maple Crest, I would have forced another opening."
"How?"
"Ooh." Vale's gaze flicked briefly toward the ceiling camera. "Escalation." The word was delivered without emotion. Rachel studied him carefully. Escalation meant he had contingency plans. "Were there more sites?" she asked. "No." "You're certain?" "Yes." She held his gaze longer. He didn't blink first. Outside the interrogation room, internal affairs had already arrived. Not to question Vale. To question process, because every recovered document now triggered an audit. Inspection overrides signed at 3:23 a.m. Closure accelerations approved after hours. Budget denials targeting investigative requests. And one particular memo, her memo, denied radar funding at Maple Crest. The press conference began at 1800 p.m. Rachel didn't attend. She reviewed files instead. Daniel Corr's deleted inspection report had been restored from Vale's offline backups. The report detailed structural anomalies beneath multiple foreclosure properties. Possible undocumented sublevels. He had flagged 3 addresses. All 3 were among Vale's constructed chambers, which meant something else. Carr had discovered irregular excavation before Vale began abducting anyone. The corruption existed first. Vale reacted second. The timeline mattered. Priya Sethi's notes, recovered from a hidden USB drive in Vale's workstation, confirmed she had been tracing financial ties between foreclosure acceleration and private redevelopment investors. One investor name repeated across transactions. Halbrook Holdings. Rachel froze on the screen. Halbrook Industrial Park. Warehouse 77. Same name. Different entity classification. Connected. Ellison, the ADA, had processed 2 dismissal tied to Halbrook Holdings developments. Not illegal, but convenient. Rachel leaned back slowly. Vale hadn't selected victims randomly. He had selected leverage points. Engineer, inspector, journalist, prosecutor, all orbiting the same development web. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. Different pattern this time, shorter ring cycle. She answered. Silence, then static, then a click. Call ended. She checked the trace. Unregistered vibe bounce. Not Vale. Vale was in custody, which meant someone else had been listening. Rachel stood abruptly. Pull all comms metadata from the underground chamber. She ordered tech. Check for secondary signal relays. Minutes later, the report came back. One external device had pinged the chamber network during the final hour before arrest. Not Vale's, unidentified. Transmission duration 12 seconds. Timestamp 3:23 p.m. again, 3:23. Not just symbolic, operational. Rachel's jaw tightened. Could someone have been monitoring Vale? An analyst asked. Or coordinating, she replied. If Vale had built infrastructure, someone else might have built motive. She returned to the interrogation room. Vale looked up as she entered. You said there were no more sites. She began. There aren't. Did anyone know what you were doing? No. Anyone help you? No. She stepped closer. Someone accessed your network at 3:23 p.m. today. For the first time, a fractional delay, not fear. Recognition. I disabled all external access, he said slowly. Yet there was a ping. Vale's eyes shifted, not evasive, but recalculating. That shouldn't be possible. Rachel studied his expression. This wasn't performance. This was surprise. You built the chambers, she said carefully. But who benefits if foreclosure corruption stays buried? Vale didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. Halbrook Holdings, redevelopment contracts, accelerated property turnover. If inspectors disappeared quietly and journalists stalled, redevelopment continued unchallenged. Vale disrupted that. Public exposure now threatened profit, which meant someone else had motive to intervene. You think I'm the architect? Vale said quietly. You built the infrastructure. Yes. But I didn't start the collapse. Rachel didn't respond, because the uncomfortable possibility was settling into place. Vale was a reaction, not the origin. And if someone else had accessed his chamber feed in the final hour, they might have been assessing risk or planning cleanup. Rachel stepped out of interrogation and into the hallway. Internal Affairs Captain approached immediately. You signed off on Maple Crest budget denial acknowledgement, he said. It wasn't approval authority, Rachel replied. It was procedural receipt. It still bears your signature. She held his gaze evenly, then audited it, because if the system was going to be exposed, it would be fully exposed. Across the bullpen news screens flashed headlines ENGINER BILD Sacier Paradisans for Orello Sur Cora Arpi Lion KD CIT Yordibaro RVEW Zanabler. Rachel returned to her desk. On the corner sat a file she hadn't opened in months. Her unresolved case. March 23rd, 3023 a.m. Victim unnamed transient male found deceased near a condemned redevelopment lot. Ruled accidental overdose. No autopsy irregularities noted. Case closed within 48 hours. She opened it slowly. The lot location. Owned at the time by Halbrook Holdings. Her pulse didn't spike. It sharpened. If Halbrook had motive to silence inspectors and journalists, what about transients sleeping near redevelopment properties? What about witnesses without voice? The room felt smaller. Vale had forced exposure, but someone else might have been benefiting from silence long before he intervened. Her phone vibrated again. Unknown number, she answered. A different voice this time. Lower. Controlled. You dug very deep today, the voice said. Rachel didn't speak. You should be careful what you unearth. A click. Disconnected. No static. No echo. Deliberate. Rachel stood very still. Adrian Vale was in custody. The chambers were dismantled. 4 victims were alive. But someone else was watching. And they weren't trying to prove a point. They were trying to protect something. Block by block, the city's foundation was cracking. And for the first time since March 23rd, Rachel understood. Her unresolved case might not have been a footnote. It might have been the first layer. March 23rd, 3:23 a.m. The timestamp had followed this investigation like a watermark. Rachel reopened the file on her desk and laid out the photographs from that night. Victim male, mid-30s, no ID, found behind a chain link fence bordering a redevelopment lot scheduled for demolition. Cause of death, presumed overdose. No defensive wounds. No external trauma beyond minor abrasions consistent with a fall. Case duration 48 hours. Close, she remembered it now with sharper clarity. Rain that night. Cold. The lot partially excavated. Construction paused pending permit review. Owned at the time by Halbrook Holdings. She studied the crime scene photos again. The body had been positioned near a temporary generator. Not slumped. Placed. At the time, it had seemed incidental. Now it looked intentional. She zoomed in on the generator casing. Faint in the background, stacked concrete forms, pre-pour foundation molds, sublevel preparation. The lot had been flagged for structural reinforcement beneath the new development. Underground space. Her pulse steadied. She called for archived soil sample results from the March 23rd scene. Minutes later, the report appeared on her screen. Sand-clay blend inconsistent with surface soil. Imported foundation backfill. The same blend identified in Vale's chambers. Which meant one of two things. Either Vale had used soil sourced from Halbrook properties, or underground excavation was happening at Halbrook sites before Vale built anything. She pulled the redevelopment permit timeline. Application filed February 10th. Approval expedited March 24th. One day after the body was discovered, Rachel leaned back slowly. The lot had been cleared of incident obstruction, then fast-tracked. She closed her eyes briefly. That case had bothered her, not because of evidence, but because of timing. Now timing was everything. She stood and walked to the evidence archive. The victim's personal effects had been minimal. No wallet, no phone, just a worn backpack. She requested retrieval. When it arrived, she opened it carefully. Inside layered clothing, a notebook damp from prior exposure, and a small flash drive taped inside the lining seam. It had been cataloged, but never analyzed, because no device was found with it. She held it up. 3:23 a.m. A transient male dies behind a redevelopment lot. Permit approved hours later. Flash drive never reviewed. The pattern wasn't coincidence. Back at her desk, Tech inserted the drive into a secure, isolated system. Files populated slowly. Video clips, short, shaky. Nighttime footage. Warehouse exterior. Halbrook Industrial Park, Warehouse 77. Timestamp on the first clip, March 22nd, 3:19 a.m. The video showed a delivery truck backed into the warehouse. Unmarked. Two men unloading crates. One crate partially open. Inside. Industrial ventilation tubing. Structural steel framing. The exact type used in Vale's final chamber. Rachel's breathing remained steady. Next clip. Interior warehouse footage. Recorded from a low vantage point, possibly concealed. Adrian Vale visible inside. Arguing with another man. Audio distorted, but fragments clear. You can't bury reports. It's already approved. People will disappear. The footage cut abruptly. Final clip. The transient male's reflection visible in a warehouse window as he recorded. Then shouting. Then the camera falling. Video ends. Rachel sat very still. Vale hadn't constructed the underground chamber at Halbrook in isolation. He had been inside Warehouse 77 before his abductions began, possibly confronting someone. The transient victim. He had witnessed something, and died within hours. Officially accidental overdose. But now, Rachel pulled toxicology from March 23rd. Opioid presence confirmed, but dosage inconsistent with habitual user levels. Elevated but not extreme, enough to impair. Not necessarily fatal without contributing factors. She requested autopsy photographs again, examining the neck. There. Subtle ligature indentation along the lateral side. Previously attributed to hoodie drawstring compression during collapse. Now less certain. She felt the case shift. Her unresolved file wasn't peripheral. It was the pivot point. Halbrook Holdings wasn't just benefiting from corruption. They were accelerating redevelopment over contested ground. Daniel Core discovered structural anomalies. Priya Sethi investigated financial ties. Ellison dismissed violations. Vale confronted suppression. And a transient witness captured footage of an underground installation before anyone else knew it existed. Then died. At 3:23 a.m. her phone vibrated again. Unknown number. She answered without hesitation. "You're connecting it now," the low voice said. Not Vale's voice. Different cadence. Different weight. "You authorized the redevelopment," Rachel said evenly. Silence. Then, "You don't understand what you're standing on," the voice replied. Click. Disconnected. Rachel didn't chase the call. Instead, she reopened Vale's interrogation transcript. He had insisted there were no additional sites, but he never denied prior involvement with Halbrook Industrial Park. She returned to holding. Vale sat quietly, hands folded. "You were at Warehouse 77 on March 2nd, she said. He looked up slowly. "Yes." "Why?" "I was consulting. For Halbrook Holdings." "Yes." "On what?" Substructure reinforcement. She held his gaze. Did you build the Halbrook chamber? No. The answer came instantly. Who did? Vale's jaw tightened for the first time since arrest. I advised against it. Who authorized it? Silence. Then, you won't find their name on paper. Rachel stepped closer. But you know it. Wes. Say it. Vale hesitated. Not from fear. From calculation. Executive partner? He said finally. Private investor. Operates through Shell Development subsidiaries. Name. Vale's eyes hardened slightly. Marcus Halbrook. The surname matched the holdings entity. Family Controlled Development Group. Rachel pulled corporate registry. Marcus Halbrook, CEO. Primary stakeholder. No criminal record. Philanthropic donor. Political contributor. And present at the March 24th redevelopment approval meeting. The same meeting expedited hours after the transient's death. Rachel's mind assembled the structure. If Halbrook had commissioned underground infrastructure at Warehouse 77 before Vale ever abducted anyone, then Vale's final chamber might not have been original. It might have been modeled or repurposed. She checked engineering blueprints seized from Vale's workstation. One schematic labeled Prototype 1 was dated March 25th, 2 days after the warehouse footage, meaning he hadn't invented the concept, he had adapted it. The original underground structure likely existed at Halbrook prior to his intervention. Rachel felt the realization settle heavily. The vigilante engineer had mirrored the methods of someone more powerful, and that someone had motive to erase witnesses. She turned back to Vale. Did Halbrook know you copied the chamber design? Vale's expression darkened slightly. He thought I was reinforcing foundation. Did he know you had the footage? No. Did he know the transient recorded you? Vale paused. I didn't know that. Until now. Rachel studied him. This wasn't shared guilt. This was divergence. Vale exposed corruption by illegal containment. Halbrook potentially buried it by permanent silence. Rachel stood upright. We're executing a warrant on Marcus Halbrook. Vale didn't smile. He didn't react at all. He simply said, be careful. Rachel didn't ask why. Because she already understood. The underground chambers were engineered. But the deeper infrastructure, the financial one, was far harder to dismantle. And somewhere between March 22nd and March 24th, a man had died at 3:23 a.m., not because of addiction, but because he saw something he wasn't supposed to. Rachel picked up her jacket. Denim. Familiar weight. The unresolved case was no longer unresolved. It was ignition. And Halbrook Industrial Park was no longer a backdrop. It was origin. Marcus Halbrook did not run. That was the first detail Rachel registered when she arrived at Halbrook Holdings headquarters. Glass facade. Top floor corner office. City skyline framed behind polished steel and curated philanthropy plaques. Men who run rarely leave this much visibility behind. Men who believe they are insulated do. Rachel entered with a warrant. No raised voices. No dramatic confrontation in the lobby. Just a quiet elevator ascent with 2 financial crimes detectives and a digital forensics team. When the office doors opened, Marcus Halbrook was already standing. Late 40s. Tailored suit. Measured posture. He didn't ask why they were there. He already knew. I assume this about the engineer, he said, calmly. Partly. Rachel replied. She stepped into the office without invitation. You consulted with Adrian Vale on March 22nd at Warehouse 77. Yes. For underground reinforcement. Yes. Reinforcement for what? Halbrook gestured vaguely toward redevelopment plans framed on the wall. Industrial retrofit. Structural stabilization. Standard procedure. Rachel placed printed stills from the flash drive footage on his desk. Grainy but identifiable. Him. Warehouse interior. Ventilation tubing. Steel framing. You accelerated redevelopment approval the morning after a witness died behind that site, she said evenly. Halbrook's expression didn't fracture. A tragic coincidence, he replied. Coincidences don't carry ligature marks. That landed. Only slightly. But enough. He adjusted his cufflinks. You're alleging homicide now. I'm alleging obstruction, suppression of safety reports, and potentially premeditated concealment of structural spaces beneath commercial property. Halbrook's eyes sharpened just a fraction. You won't find bodies down there, he said. Rachel leaned forward slightly. That's not what I'm looking for. Silence stretched between them. Measured, evaluative. You think I built cages? Halbrook asked quietly. I think you built something underground before Vale ever did, Rachel said. And I think someone saw it. Halbrook exhaled slowly. You misunderstand development strategy. Then clarify it. He walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. Warehouse 77 was scheduled for secure document storage during transitional acquisition. We had proprietary investor records that required off-grid containment. Underground containment. Rachel corrected. Yes. Without city permit. Pending submission. Rachel didn't blink. Daniel Core flagged that site for structural anomaly. He was mistaken. He disappeared. Then related. Priya Sethi investigated your foreclosure acceleration pattern. She speculated. She disappeared. Halbrook turned back toward her. Resurfaced, apparently. Rachel held his gaze. You authorized substructure excavation before permits were approved. We're preparing for inspection. By deleting the inspection report. Halbrook's jaw tightened. Now they were closer to fracture. You're building a narrative around a rogue engineer's obsession, he said calmly. Kidnap people. Yes, Rachel agreed. He did, and you're attempting to attach that to a corporate entity because it's convenient. Rachel stepped closer to his desk. Adrian Vale copied your design. That statement hung heavier than the others. Halbrook's expression shifted, not denial. Recognition. You're assuming origin without proof, he replied. March 22nd, Rachel continued. You met Vale in Warehouse 77. March 23rd, a witness dies at 3:23 a.m. March 24th, your redevelopment approval is expedited. Halbrook remained silent. Rachel pressed. What was originally planned for that underground chamber? A beat. Then, data security. Why ventilation capable of sustaining human life? Silence. Rachel let it stretch. Why reinforced interior locking mechanism? Still silence. Why internal camera infrastructure? His gaze hardened. You think in criminal constructs, he said. I think in risk mitigation. Rachel tilted her head slightly. Risk mitigation from what? Halbrook didn't answer, because the answer wasn't financial. It was reputational. Political. If foreclosure accelerations were challenged publicly, redevelopment contracts could freeze. If inspectors delayed structural approvals, investors pulled funding. If journalists published evidence of override patterns, shareholders demanded inquiry. An underground space allows discretion. A space no one sees. Rachel's voice remained steady. Who was that chamber originally intended to hold? Halbrook's eyes flickered. There. A fracture. It was never used, he said. That's not what I asked. Silence. Rachel didn't fill it. After several seconds, he responded carefully. It was contingency. For what? For whistleblowers. The word landed heavily. Explain, Rachel said. In high-value redevelopment zones. Halbrook said slowly, activists and internal dissenters sometimes attempt to sabotage timelines. We anticipated disruption. You anticipated abducting them. Rachel asked. No. Then what? Negotiation containment. Rachel felt the temperature in the room shift. You built a holding facility for people who opposed your projects. Halbrook exhaled. It was never deployed. But it existed. Rachel absorbed that. The transient male had recorded it before use, and died. Daniel Carr flagged irregular excavation. Report deleted. Priya Sethi investigated financial anomalies. Silenced. Adrian Vale discovered the infrastructure, turned it into exposure. But Halbrook had conceived the original underground chamber not as vigilante justice, but as corporate coercion. Rachel's phone vibrated. Unknown number. She ignored it. Not now. Your executive authorization logs, she said. We're seizing them. Halbrook didn't resist, because resistance implies fear, and fear implies weakness. But as officers began imaging his systems, Rachel noticed something else. He wasn't nervous. He was calculating. You think this ends with arrest? He asked quietly. I think it ends with disclosure, she replied. Halbrook almost smiled. Disclosure destabilizes markets. Then markets adjust. He studied her for a long moment. You've reopened more than you realize, he said. I'm aware. Rachel stepped back toward the door. As she exited, her phone vibrated again, same unknown number. She answered this time. Static. Then, you're dismantling the wrong layer, the low voice said. Not Halbrook. Not Vale. Someone else. Who is this? She demanded. A faint chuckle. Follow the approvals. Click. Disconnected. Rachel stopped walking. Follow the approvals. She turned back toward Halbrook's office. He stood exactly where she left him, but the corporate registry on her tablet showed something she hadn't focused on yet. Halbrook Holdings had majority shareholder control, but redevelopment approval signatures were not his. They belonged to a city planning commissioner. Approved at 3/7/23 a.m., Rachel's unresolved case had never been about just one developer. Vale built chambers. Halbrook engineered contingency. But someone inside city governance had enabled all of it, and that layer was still untouched. The foundation wasn't cracking, it was connected, and the timestamp 3/7/23 wasn't just a signature. It was synchronization. Follow the approvals. Rachel replayed the phrase as the elevator descended from Halbrook Holdings. Vale had built chambers. Halbrook had commissioned one. But redevelopment acceleration required signatures. Permits do not move at 3/23 a.m. without authorization. City Planning Commissioner Leonard Voss, appointed 6 years earlier. Background in urban revitalization. Public reputation reformist. Digital signature appearing on 3 expedited redevelopment approvals tied to Halbrook Holdings. Timestamp 3023 a.m. on 3 separate dates. Rachel didn't call ahead. She went directly to the municipal planning office. Voss was still in his office. Late evening. Lights dimmed, suit jacket off, reading glasses perched low on his nose. He looked up as she entered. I assume this is about Vale, he said, echoing Halbrook's phrasing. It's about 323. Rachel replied. She closed the door behind her. No dramatic gesture, just containment. Voss removed his glasses slowly. You'll need to be more specific. You approved redevelopment acceleration for Warehouse 77 at 3:23 a.m. on March 24th. Yes. Why at that hour? Workflow overflow. He replied smoothly. Digital approvals allow flexibility. 3 approvals. Same timestamp. Different dates. Wes. Coincidence. No. Rachel waited. Voss leaned back in his chair. It's when I work. Why? Because no one interrupts me. Silence. Measured. Rachel stepped closer to his desk. You dismissed Daniel Corr's inspection anomaly report. It lacked substantiation. You overrode the secondary review request. Wes. You expedited Maple Crest redevelopment hours after a body was found. Voss's gaze sharpened slightly. The overdose incident had no bearing on permit compliance. Ligature marks, Rachel said evenly. Voss did not react outwardly. You're suggesting homicide, he asked. I'm suggesting someone saw something. Voss folded his hands. And what do you think they saw? Rachel watched him carefully. An underground structure at Warehouse 77 before permits were granted. Voss did not blink. Hypothetical, he said. Did you know Halbrook commissioned substructure excavation prior to approval? No. Did you know Vale confronted Halbrook about it? No. You're certain? Yes. Rachel let the silence stretch. Voss was calm, not defensive. But his calm was administrative, not engineered like Vale's. Different temperament, different discipline. You've been accessed externally, she said suddenly. Voss's brow moved slightly. Excuse me. Vale's underground chamber network received a ping at 3:23 p.m. today. She watched closely. There. A flicker. Microsecond delay. You think I was monitoring a kidnapper? Voss asked. I think someone with authority had motive to know whether exposure was imminent. Voss leaned forward. You're chasing noise, he said quietly. Rachel placed printed stills from the transient's flash drive onto his desk. Warehouse interior, Halbrook, Vale, structural framing. Voss studied the image. Amateur footage, he said. Recovered from a dead witness. Voss looked up. Tragic. Rachel held his gaze. You signed expedited approval hours after his death. Permit review had been pending for weeks. You didn't order secondary structural inspection. No. Why? Because the file met minimum compliance. Rachel's voice did not rise. Daniel Core disagreed. Voss's tone hardened slightly. Carr's methodology was inefficient. He disappeared. He resigned. He was abducted. Rachel corrected. By Vale. Yes. And survived. Yes. Because Vale preserved him. Voss tilted his head slightly. You're implying I would have killed him? Rachel didn't answer directly. I'm implying that when corruption surfaces, someone benefits from its burial. Silence filled the office. The city hummed faintly beyond the glass windows. Voss removed his glasses again. You want to know what 3-23 is? He asked quietly. Yes. It's not symbolism. Rachel waited. It's system auto. Batch override. She didn't interrupt. Our permit software processes after-hours submissions in group batches. When certain compliance thresholds are met, it releases them at fixed timestamps. 3:23 a.m. She said. Yes. Why that time? Legacy server configuration from a decade ago. Rachel processed that. Not symbolic, systemic. 3:23 wasn't a signature. It was automation. Which meant someone exploited automation. Who configures override thresholds? She asked. IT governance. Who adjusts compliance flags? Mid-level compliance officers. Rachel felt the structure shift again. Not a single executive. Not a single commissioner. A network of procedural gatekeepers. Who flagged Daniel Core's report as insufficient? She asked. Voss accessed his desktop. Pulled the audit trail. A name appeared. Compliance analyst Theresa Laird. Rachel didn't recognize it. Role, she asked. Mid-tier planning compliance. Tenure. 8 months. Start date. 2 weeks before Core's deletion. Rachel's pulse remained steady. Who recommended her hire? Voss scanned further. Referral from private sector. Halbrook Holdings. There it was, the layer beneath the layer, not executive, not commissioner, embedded compliance. Adjust thresholds, suppress anomalies, exploit auto batch override. Approvals release at 3:23 a.m. No human signature necessary, just automated compliance. Rachel stepped back. Where is Theresa Laird now? Voss checked the system. Remote, logged off 30 minutes ago. Rachel's phone vibrated. Unknown number. She answered. You're almost there, the low voice said. Not Halbrook. Not Vale. Not Voss. Theresa, where are you? Rachel asked. A soft exhale. Under the surface. The voice replied. Click. Disconnected. Rachel looked back at Voss. She configured the thresholds, she said. Yes. She flagged Core's report. Less. She referred Vale's initial complaint to archival. Less. And she was hired through Halbrook. Less. The pattern clarified. Halbrook commissioned underground infrastructure. Vale discovered it and mirrored it. Core flagged it and was suppressed. Sethi investigated and was silenced. Ellison dismissed irregularities under pressure. But the procedural fulcrum, the one adjusting compliance thresholds, was embedded. Theresa Laird. Rachel turned toward the door. Pull her login IP. She ordered over comms. Response came within seconds. Last active connection Municipal Data Center Annex. Rachel stopped. Physical presence. Badge access logged at 3:19 p.m. Entry. 3C19. Warehouse footage timestamp. March 22nd. History repeating. Rachel felt the alignment snap into place. She's not hiding, Rachel said quietly. She's maintaining infrastructure. Because compliance doesn't disappear when exposed. It migrates. She moved quickly toward the data center annex. If approvals were automated at 3:23, and she was adjusting thresholds in real time, then corruption wasn't collapsing. It was recalibrating. And if someone needed the system intact, they wouldn't build chambers. They'd erase them. And maybe erase the evidence along with them. The Municipal Data Center Annex sat 3 blocks behind City Hall. No glass facade. No skyline view. Just reinforced concrete, restricted badge access, and humming infrastructure that kept approvals, permits, and records flowing invisibly through the city. If corruption had a pulse, it would beat here. Rachel arrived without sirens. No announcement. 2 cybercrime officers flanked her. Badge logs Theresa Laird entered at 3:19 p.m. No exit logged. Current time 9:42 p.m. The server room temperature hit immediately. Cold, regulated air designed for machines, not people. rows of blinking racks, soft white noise of cooling fans, and at the far terminal, Theresa Laird, late 30s, plain clothing, headphones resting around her neck, multiple system dashboards open across 3 monitors. She didn't turn when Rachel entered. "You're late," Theresa said calmly. Rachel stopped 5 feet behind her. "Stand up." Theresa complied. No panic, no attempt to run. She removed her badge and placed it on the desk. "You followed the approvals," she said. "Yes." Theresa nodded once. "Good." Rachel studied her posture. Different from Vale, different from Halbrook, less ideological, more operational. "You configured compliance thresholds," Rachel said. "Less." "You flagged Daniel Corr's report." "Wes." "You archived Vale's complaint." "Yes." "You allowed redevelopment acceleration for Halbrook Holdings." "Yes." Each answer delivered without hesitation. "Why?" Rachel asked. Theresa finally turned fully. "Because the system requires stability." "Stability," Rachel repeated. "Urban redevelopment depends on predictability. Inspectors who overreach delay economic flow. Journalists amplify disruption. Engineers escalate risk. So you delete them?" Rachel asked. "I didn't abduct anyone." "You suppressed their oversight." "I filtered noise." Rachel's voice remained even. Daniel Corr wasn't noise. He was inefficient. Priya Sathi. Speculative. Vale. Emotional. Rachel stepped closer, and the transient witness behind Warehouse 77. Theresa's eyes shifted briefly. "That was unfortunate. Did you kill him?" "No." Rachel held her gaze. "You adjusted compliance thresholds so that anomalies never triggered manual review." "Wes." You knew Halbrud Cavation underground excavation prior to approval." "Yes." "You knew Vale confronted it." "Yes." "You knew the footage existed." Theresa paused. "Not initially." "When did you know?" "After the overdose." Rachel felt the air in the room tighten. "What did you do when you knew?" she asked. Theresa didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached slowly toward the keyboard. Rachel's weapon lifted instantly. "Hands away." Theresa stopped. "I was archiving backups," she said calmly, "to preserve system continuity. Or erase it." Theresa tilted her head slightly. "You think corruption is a person," she said. "It's infrastructure." Rachel didn't blink. "Infrastructure still has operators." Theresa's eyes flicked toward the center monitor. Rachel followed the movement. A countdown clock sat on the screen. No 237. Not hours. Minutes. "What is that?" Rachel demanded. "Auto purge protocol." Theresa replied. "Purge what?" "All non-compliant data clusters." Rachel's pulse sharpened. "Which includes?" "Vale's recovered documents." "Cor's restored report." "Your reopened March 23rd file." Rachel stepped forward instantly and pulled the tower cable from the back of the workstation. The screen flickered. Countdown paused at 0:12. Cybercrime officers moved in, disconnecting network feeds. Theresa didn't resist. She simply watched. "You embedded a fail-safe," Rachel said. "Yes." "Why?" "Because exposure destabilizes markets." Halbrook's words echoed. Different voice. Same doctrine. "Who instructed you?" Rachel asked. "No one." Theresa replied. "I serve the system." Rachel stepped closer. "The system doesn't tell you to kill witnesses." "I didn't kill anyone." "Then who did?" Theresa's gaze held steady. "People at the margins die all the time," she said. "It's rarely remarkable." Rachel felt the anger rise, but she contained it. "Did you alter toxicology on March 23rd? Theresa didn't answer. Silence is admission when data logs exist. Rachel signaled cybercrime. "Pull forensic database modification logs for that date." Minutes felt longer in server air. Then, modification detected, an officer said. "Toxicology field accessed at 3021 a.m. March 23rd. By whom?" Rachel asked. He checked. "User ID T Laird." Theresa didn't flinch. "You altered opioid concentration levels," Rachel said evenly. "To ensure closure." "You ensured a homicide read as overdose." Theresa didn't correct her. "Why?" Rachel asked again. "Because excavation delay would have triggered investor withdrawal." Theresa replied calmly. Halbrook Holdings was leveraged across 3 municipal bonds. Collapse would have rippled outward. So one life equals market stability, Rachel said. Theresa met her gaze. You're framing it emotionally. Rachel took one step closer. You're framing it economically. Silence. Cold server air hummed. Vale reacted emotionally. Theresa continued. He built chambers. Dramatic, inefficient. You built deletion protocols. Rachel replied, yes. And you would have erased everything tonight. Yes. Why now? Because once arrest reports hit national feeds, federal auditors initiate automated crawl. I was preventing cascade. Rachel understood it fully now. Vale built visible chambers to expose rot. Halbrook built concealed structures to contain dissent. Theresa maintained invisible infrastructure to preserve financial continuity. 3 layers. 1 ecosystem. Did Halbrook know you altered toxicology? Rachel asked. No. Did Voss? No. You acted alone. Wes. Rachel studied her face carefully. No tremor, no deflection. She believed she was protecting civic stability. People aren't variables, Rachel said quietly. They are. Theresa replied. Cybercrime signaled confirmation. All purge scripts disabled. Rachel stepped back. Theresa was placed in restraints. No resistance. As she was escorted out, she spoke one final sentence. You dismantled confidence tonight. Rachel didn't answer. Because confidence built on falsified closure isn't stability. It's erosion. 2 weeks later, federal charges filed against Theresa Laird for evidence tampering, obstruction, and homicide. Marcus Halbrook indicted for conspiracy and unlawful excavation. Leonard Voss under investigation for oversight negligence. Adrian Vale facing trial for kidnapping, but now classified as primary whistleblower witness in corruption proceedings. Daniel Corr reinstated pending review. Priya Sethi preparing a full expose. Mark Ellison suspended. The transient victim's case reclassified as homicide. Name identified through fingerprint recovery, Luis Navarro. 32. Unhoused. Witness, not statistic. Rachel stood alone at the March 23rd redevelopment lot. Construction halted. Yellow tape stretched where concrete once waited to be poured. The ground beneath remained undisturbed now. No hidden chamber. No silent infrastructure. Just earth. She checked the time. 3:23 a.m. The hour had shifted from signature to reminder. Systems don't fail loudly. They fail quietly, through small approvals, minor deletions, overnight overrides. If you're still following this case, remember this. Corruption rarely looks like violence. It looks like efficiency. And the most dangerous chambers aren't built underground. They're built inside processes no one questions. Rachel turned away from the lot. The case was closed on paper. But vigilance isn't episodic. It's continuous. Because somewhere, another approval is batching. Another anomaly is being filtered. Another life is being reduced to variable. And someone has to notice before the clock reaches 0. If you believe oversight matters, pay attention to what moves at 3:23 a.m. Because that's when no one's supposed to be watching. Except someone always is.